I remember watching Nelson Mandela being freed from captivity. My first reaction was, how can this man, who spent 27 years in apartheid prisons, look younger and fresher than most 27-year-olds brought up in the townships? Indeed, if you lived in a township, you'd be lucky to survive for 27 years. I discovered that Mandela's incarceration wasn't all that it was hyped up to be. He started what was supposed to be a life sentence in Robben Island, reputedly the toughest, most strict prison on earth for a black person. Despite this, he was still allowed to communicate with political allies outside of the prison and able to keep fit by playing tennis. He didn't serve his entire sentence in Robben Island. He was moved to Polesmore Prison, a more relaxed environment where he held meetings with government officials and foreign dignitaries. In addition, he had chauffeured day trips, sightseeing, strolling along the beach, even stopping for coffee. Unfortunately, whilst there, he contracted tuberculosis, but after a spell in hospital, he was moved again to somewhere with a more agreeable climate, Victor Verster Prison. Here, he had a private cottage with a swimming pool and his own cook and even tailored suits. Of course, his meetings with dignitaries continued, particularly those from the reigning apartheid government. Now, very little of this is mentioned when Europeans want us to view Mandela as a hero who suffered 27 years of hardship for black people. Why would an apartheid regime with a long record of extreme abuse, torture, and murder against African people in general, and dissidents in particular, treat this supposed threat to their dominance with such grace and comfort? Why would they and other European nations cover up the truth with stories of deprivation and hardship? Why? Well, European nations have been fighting for over 40 years across Africa, trying to retain their colonies, but they were losing. Not only were Europeans losing the military conflicts, but they were also losing the war of hearts and minds. I remember in the 1970s wanting to go to Africa to join the struggles, but different liberation movements from across the continent came regularly to the UK and all had the same message. Don't go to Africa. Stay here and let everyone know what's happening in Africa. Despite efforts to suppress the news, the world got to know what Europeans had been doing in Africa. We often talk about slavery, but in many ways colonialism was worse. According to conservative estimates, around 12 million Africans were taken during centuries of slavery. But the Belgians alone are said to have killed around 10 million Africans during just decades of colonial rule. And the Belgians were only one of the smaller colonial powers in terms of land. Germany is recognised as committing the first act of genocide in the 20th century when they almost totally wiped out the Herero and Nama peoples of Namibia. It's estimated that between 1904 and 1908 they slaughtered over 100,000 Africans. And the German Second Reich was responsible for creating in Namibia the type of concentration camps that were later used by Hitler and the Third Reich. With their loss of power in Africa and mounting international condemnation, it was clear to the European nations that apartheid would eventually have to go. However, the Europeans wanted to ensure a strong economic and political position for them in a post-apartheid South Africa. Their hopes lay in supporting the ANC. Why? Now, the ANC had white membership, even at the highest levels, and it also had a history of working with mainstream South African corporate, political and financial institutions. Nelson Mandela's incarceration wasn't for punishment, but for protection and preparation to lead the ANC and a new South Africa, whilst preserving a place for the old South Africa and the old colonial powers. He wasn't a black hero. He was a hero for European interests. The NC's political position was clear to see by their confrontational relationship with African freedom organisations. For example, refusing even to share a platform with them. I remember during the apartheid era, when in the UK there was much excitement after hearing that the ANC were going to attend a meeting with other organisations such as, if I remember rightly, the Pan-African Congress of Azania, the Azanian People's Organization, and the Black Consciousness Movement. The excitement wasn't for the ANC, but for the chance to see how they would fare on a platform with these other organizations, something that they had always refused to do. We were all disappointed when we discovered that also, although the ANC had agreed to be in the same building, they refused to share the same stage. So after listening to the other organisations, the audience had to decamp to another hall in order to hear the ANC. An old mentor of mine, affectionately known as Brother Coker, was a founding member of the Black Consciousness movement in South Africa, along with activists such as Steve Biko. When compared to Biko, we can see how much of a threat Mandela was not to the apartheid regime. Mandela spent 27 years in prisons, being groomed, pampered, and treated to comforts African people outside of prison could only dream of. Steve Biko didn't even make it to prison. He was beaten to death during interrogation and died. Whilst he was dying, Nelson Mandela was busy writing his autobiography. Indeed, when Biko died, he was just one of almost as many activists who died in South African prisons in just 12 months as the number of years Mandela spent incarcerated. Nelson Mandela and the ANC did not bring an end to apartheid. The Africans who fought European colonialism across the continent achieved that. Many of these are unsung and even unknown heroes. Nelson Mandela may have started out fighting for African freedom. However, his true fame can be said to have come from fighting for the former European colonialists and the apartheid regime.